Without me? No, right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's special city council meeting. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Maena?
Present.
Councilperson Kazarian? Present. Councilperson Lavasa?
Present.
Councilperson Figueroa? Present. Councilperson Solano?
Present.
Councilperson Rosado Martinez?
Present.
Council President Ferry?
Present.
Council President, we have one.
You all please rise for the I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda, number 3, is public comment. I believe we have one.
Okay, no one has signed up.
The next item on the agenda, number 4, new business hearing and consideration. Under A, a resolution requesting the question be placed on the November 2024 citywide ballot, seeking approval for the qualified electors to authorize the city of Central Falls to issue general obligation bonds and notes for the construction, renovation, improvement, alteration, repair, furnishing, and equipping of schools and school facilities in the city in an amount not to exceed $26,049,000. Introduction carried by request.
Before we start, Mr. City Clerk, could you come up and straighten this out? I think I hit the wrong button, so.
Council President, good evening. How are you?
Okay.
I wanted to start off with an introduction for the short presentation we're going to give today. The hard copy you have in front of you is exactly what's also on the screen. So Central Falls has been approved by RIDE, Department of Education, for $170 million of school construction capital spending, which would be reimbursed at a rate of 98.4%. Now, to date, we've only taken advantage of 144 of that $170 million cap that we were allowed to borrow up to. So the proposal that you have in front of you is for the $26 million difference between the existing bond and the RIDE-approved max, which would ensure that we're not going to leave any money on the table that we can use on behalf of our kids. RIDE is fully engaged with the proposal that our team is going to walk through for you. So I want to make clear that by voting in favor of today's resolution, this isn't an authorization for the city to borrow this amount of money. Today's vote is a non-binding resolution that simply is approving the beginning of the public vetting process to evaluate if this actually makes sense on behalf of the city. So before any money is ever actually approved, right, this is going to go before voters in a ballot question, if you approve the resolution today, and return to the city council for final borrowing approval. So the question for you today isn't should we bond $26 million, it's should we kick off the process to consider this, right? Now I do want to make clear, if we don't kick off this process today, right, it's not going to allow us the option within the next year to borrow this money, and that would mean that we would not have the funds eventually to complete the proposed dual language pre-K to 8 school on the site of the current high school. So I have Mary and Sam Bradner from our project management team. Mary is going to come next. She's going to walk through some of the financial specifics, which I believe are the first 2 slides that you have in front of you. And she's going to walk through how the city can support this hypothetical bond without a direct impact to taxpayers. And then we also have Sam Bradner, who's going to be able to give you an overview of, if these funds were eventually approved, what it would mean for the kids in the city in terms of our facilities. All right.
Good evening. So I'm here to talk about the financial impact, and I think it's always important to see where we are today from a debt service requirement before we even begin to talk about where we might be going. So I just want to remind everybody of where we were. That's the first slide that you see there. So you can see on the FY25 number, that number is embedded in the budget that was recently passed. not a new number, it's a number that's in there. And you can see all future debt payments on debt that we've already secured. You can see it, there's a significant drop, as you see, in 2029, which we will, address when it comes, but there's certainly room within our debt service budget in the outer years. So that's where we are today. You can see the different debt instruments that are contained in which, not as relevant to this conversation, but we obviously have each of them monitored and that's our current debt. So if you go to the next page, what it does is it's a pro forma debt schedule of our proposed bond. This was prepared in conjunction with our city's financial advisors, and it's super important to remember that these are just estimates. They need to take some assumptions into mind. It's just to try and give us a vision of what our debt service payment would be on a $26 million bond. So you can see, it's this slide that shows you the actual impact of the 98.4% reimbursement. So you can see the first debt payment, is total debt service is $2 million, and after the reimbursement, our payment would be $32,000, our net payment. So it really illustrates the commitment by RIDE to Central Falls. Again, over the life of the whole $26 million bond, the city's payment, both principal and interest, would be less than $700,000. As RJ said, we don't foresee a direct impact on the taxpayers. We have construction capital line within our current budget for the school district that I would simply reallocate out of construction because we would now be using these bonds and move it to debt service. So I don't see any direct impact on the budget going forward if this were to come to fruition. I guess lastly, I just want to reiterate, this is obviously, as RJ said, it's the first step in the process. Once this passes, if it passes, then the city has a lot of hard work to do to figure out the best way to structure this debt, which has the most impact at the lowest cost. There's still a lot of work to do. Nothing is final here. We're still going to be moving forward. So once we do come up with a path forward, like RJ said, we're going to come back and look for council approval on an actual borrowing, or that's the hope. So that's the 50,000 foot view of the bond. I can turn it over to Sam to talk about the exciting things we would do with these funds, or if you have any questions, I can do that as well.
I got a question for you before you go. You say out of the 26,049,000 that we managed to borrow, the amount of interest we're gonna pay through the whole loan will be how much
Interest? Or I just have the debt service payment, which is in the principal and interest together, and over the life of it, it looks like it'll be less than $700,000.
Now you're talking only about the interest.
Nope, I'm talking about the whole debt service, both principal and interest. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also have a question.
Yes.
Mary, so it wouldn't start till 2026, right?
That is the
If,
current
for
that we have for this example, yeah.
It would,
Because we still have the 144 that we would use first, and then we would do this.
got it. For the line item that you mentioned, the school construction line item, I don't remember, do you remember how much is in there about?
100.
100, so it would, yeah, okay.
Yep.
That's all.
Yep.
Thank you. And then just on the interest, some of it looks like it, so like, for example, for 2031, I know it's like taking a lot of assumptions into consideration. So $1 million, and then just the interest would be $1,079,000, so it's like at 100+% the interest.
Well, it's taking the interest on the whole 26 million. So it's taking it on the remaining
Not on
principal,
that
not on
specific-
the
okay,
principal
okay.
debt payment.
Yep.
Yep.
That's helpful.
Yep.
And thank you for the call.
Of course.
And I also want to thank you because I see this one that we like Ryan, I see those numbers, and I see that 26 million is more than the budget of the city itself.
Oh, yeah,
It raised some concern on my.
absolutely, totally understand. Yeah,
Thank you very much for
you're
that.
welcome.
Anything else?
Hi, good evening, Council President, members of the council. Sam Bradner with Paragon Group. We are a project management company. We've been working with the district and the city since 2020, I think, Matt, now? Yep. And year 4. So, and I've been before this group in the past. We oversaw the review and approval process for the stage 2. If you recall, we were before this body back in 2022, right about this time, to get it approved before we went before RISE and submitted that process. So, as Mary and RJ said, this is really a continuation of that work that we've been doing over the past 4 years. The second school was already part of that overall approval process. And that process really allowed for really a community-wide roadmap for teaching and learning, looking forward for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And I think, I'm sure folks have seen the Higginson site. Right now, it's not super exciting. We're digging holes and we're filling it back in again, so there's not a lot of interesting stuff yet, but it's going to start happening soon. Steel's showing up next month, so we're really going to start to see things come to work. But this next piece in that process is the dual language school that would be located at the site of the current high school. That school, the current school, would be demolished. That's about a 2.2 acre property. There's a lot of building on there right now, as you're all probably very familiar with. What would replace it is what you see on this slide and what you have in front of you would be a new construction, 3-story, about a 61,000 square foot building. Planned enrollment would be just shy of about 450 students. That number will probably shift as we, if we have the opportunity to kind of continue planning. All those numbers were set 2 years ago. And as we all know, demographic shift, approaches to teaching and learning shift as well, so we know some of these will be done. And it was planned to be a 2-track school. If we go to the next slide. This is a site plan of that site. Again, as folks are familiar with Illinois and Summer Streets, on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see that white outline. That is the footprint of the existing building. And then what we have surrounding that to the right would be open space, outdoor learning opportunities, as well as kind of some of the functional things that have to happen around. So loading, service, access around the building. And then there would be that small multi-purpose field that sits to the right of there. If we go to the third slide, and again, if you squint, you can see some of the detail here, but this just represents.
Could you please turn this a little bit, the screen a little bit more to this way?
I'm sorry?
Thank you. Yeah, no, but I wouldn't.
You could turn the screen to the
on the
council.
same page. Thank you.
So this
Well, you can leave
represents.
it so everybody can see it, thank you.
This represents the 3 floors of the building as they were planned back in 2022 and into early 2023. Basically what you have is 3 floors of classrooms. Depending on the final grade configuration, you have your pre-K and your younger students on the lower and middle floors, and then upper grades on those upper floors. You'd have a lot of the similar elements that are in the new high school that's coming out of the ground, but obviously scaled and kind of programmed appropriately for the age group and grades that will be in that building. There are elements such as outdoor learning spaces that are incorporated into the rooftop of the building. We have a rooftop terrace that was planned for this. You have collaboration areas. You have 21st century learning opportunities that, again, in that new high school, and we're seeing these in schools throughout the state. And then you'd have kind of your typical combined gymnasium, cafeteria, auditorium type of space that can be shared in kind of multi-purpose use across, depending on what time of day it is and what program you're using. So again, very high level, I would say, matching Mary's comment, probably a 50,000 foot level of information here. There's a lot of data to back this up, but I think that if the city and the community decide to kind of take this next step, the good thing is there's already been a lot of planning done. Still a lot of planning to do. We spent probably a year and a half planning that high school before it came out of the ground. And that same type of effort would have to go in order to get this school, or the design work here all the way so that we can go out to bid, hire a contractor, and actually start that vertical construction process. Happy to answer any questions that the council.
Yeah, what's in the grade thing on the third floor?
Yep, so that's actually the roof of, because this would just be a 1 to 2 story space. So that's the roof of that space that you see on that third floor. So, and you can see here, it's coming up from this floor up to that floor, and that's the roof on the other side.
If they can,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I just want to make a comment. If they can, I don't want to be a jumper, but if they can just blow it out thing and see that project down right now would be great.
Yeah, believe it. And then taking that building down is not an insignificant cost. We evaluated that when we were doing the stage 2 work that we brought before you guys back in 2022. It's an old building, a lot of stuff in it that, these days you would not build a building out of that, so all that has to be taken care of and then get rid of it. We agree.
When you
See that,
say, 2-track school, what do you mean?
So 2 tracks, Erica, you can answer the 2-track better than I, or even Sarah can answer the question about. Two tracks.
Okay, yeah, cause that would,
Incorporated with that dual language approach as well.
thank you for that, because that was my next question around the 450.
Yeah.
Enrollment, it's pre-K to 8, and so like right now I know that, for example, Elorist and Bets each have around 400 kids.
Yep.
And that's K to 4 or 5.
Okay, yeah, 5, yeah.
So it just seemed like a very small number, considering it's pre-K to 8.
And I think what the goal was kind of this master plan approach to all the schools. So if you recall back to 2022, we talked about taking that approach across probably multiple buildings and kind of resetting how that teaching and learning is happening across the board. This is kind of that first piece, and then that would then allow for renovations, possibly additions on the existing buildings, and kind of getting to that, hopefully that shared vision across all the facilities. So my comment earlier, I think it's also the district and the city and the community have kind of learned a lot in the last 2 years, and will that hold the day? I'm not sure. That's our job is to help you to all implement these, but I think it's up to the leadership folks to kind of decide what is the right path.
Yeah, thank you. And then that was my next question around Elorist and veterans. If we foresaw that any of these funds could potentially, help improve those schools as well.
Sure.
We know it's needed there
Yep.
too.
100%.
So, so you kind of answered that as well. The reason why I like the concern for the 450, I'm all for the 3, right? But like the 450 seems small, only because I know that there's a lot of demand for raises currently, the current dual language, so it's growing. So even if we took, some of the kids who are already enrolled at Vets and Ella and like sort of shifted them over to the pre-K to 8 dual language school, like there's still a big demand for it, so it just seems a little bit low. But I know that there's a lot of other planning that can happen, and it's nothing set. Just wanted to make sure that's out there for you guys.
But they're great comments, because there's a lot of moving parts, never mind the physical building, but then how to program it, how do all the classes, how do the schedules work, how the clock works,
I worked in the district for a while too, so like some of this I know, and that's how I know the enrollment and everything of the schools, but, okay, this is helpful.
Hey, Councilman, I would just add that the pre-K to 8 is basically 10 grades. And if there's 2 tracks per grade, that's 20 classrooms. So it envisions about 21 kids per class, which could go up or could go down. We did run through scenarios on the school building committee of doing 4 classrooms per grade, 4 tracks, and the construction number just got very big at that point. But to address your point about races, the plan that RIDE submitted for that larger number of 170 did envision renovating Calcutt to be a second dual language school to accompany the need for increased enrollment.
And I think you've seen with the smaller projects that have happened over the last 2 years in Calcutt, there's been progress in that. It's not a full plan implemented at once, but we've seen, you know, the science lab improvement, we've seen the media center created. Right now, there's work going on in the cafeteria. So those all are building blocks towards that plan that was approved in 2022. So it's a little more incremental, just because of the availability of funds and kind of how the process is.
I think technically you just replace it with school with Robinson School would be closing. I think that's the only school that would probably, really small enrollment as it is. Robinson School that will,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that school will be closing, so obviously, I'm sure that's all taken into equation.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to make sure that the other challenge that we have is just swing space. So when we're thinking about renovation of those existing buildings, where do people go in the short term? So that's a whole chess game of process that we've got to think about.
Yeah, and along the lines of Rice's or Robertson closing, I guess one consideration is also Captain Monk, because if we're doing GK.
Right.
Right, just,
That's not a big enrollment, I don't think that.
yeah,
Anyone
I
else?
just,
Anyone else that we know? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Anyone else? Looking at it, I think it's a win-win situation. And the good part is there's a couple of methods here that we can monitor the, the first passage obviously will be left to the electors, which is the people of the city, and that will come back to the council like our case. So I think there's enough stopgaps to look and to present to the General Assembly. I think the key is the voters. If the electors want it, I mean, let's face facts, so that's the people we have to satisfy, is the residents that elect us. And then it'll come back to the council, and there might be some further questions. Anyway, with that,
can I have a comment?
yes.
So along the lines of what you mentioned, which I totally agree with, which is like, let people vote, and if this is what they want, we should find a way, but also like be fiscally responsible and make sure that we do have a plan in place to pay, which it sounds like we might have some of the room with some of the school construction money in our current budget, but just also wanted to make sure like the city, us, we have a plan in place to make sure that we can cover the debt throughout the year, so that we don't find ourselves in a place where, where we would.
Anyone else? Clerk, please call the roll.
Need a motion.
He said,
Oh,
he said
I'm sorry.
introduce only, no? It's
Wait.
introduce. This is introduce. We introduce in this.
It's a resolution, so we won't be voting on it.
And why does say first reading? Yeah.
Says introduction, I saw the same thing,
Yeah.
and it, like I put
It shouldn't have said that in the
It should, right? Right.
agenda,
Yeah.
but the actual text of, that you're voting on is, it's a resolution, so it's not, it's a vote today.
They said that, yeah. Okay, no problem. I just wanted to
So we're looking
clarify
for a
that.
motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, first and second, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Biden,
Yes.
Councilperson Kazarian,
Yes.
Councilperson Lavasa,
Yes.
Councilperson Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilperson Solano,
Yes.
Councilperson Lozano Martinez,
Yes.
President Ferry.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Next on the agenda is adjournment.
It's time to tell it that far.
It's not.
No.
gifted it.
Para